Welcome back to the Jackson Neill Sports Podcast here on Tuesday, September 18th, 2018. Thank you so much for tuning in on either SoundCloud, Stitcher, iTunes, or YouTube. Wherever you want, you can find this podcast. Got a jam-packed episode today. Later in the episode, going to be talking about the Bears, the Oakland Raiders. Was that the right trade for the Raiders, trading Khalil Mack? After last night's win, it's not looking like it's so great for the Raiders, but I'm here to tell you it was. It was the right move for John Gruden. We'll be talking about that later. But first, I had my interview with New Orleans Times Picayune writer Brody Miller talking about LSU football and their amazing 3-0 start to the season with 2 wins over top 10 teams. Just want to get started right now. What is the current feeling around the LSU football team?
The current feeling, I guess I would say, is just that, everyone knew how tough the schedule was going to be, and everyone knew there was a scenario where things could possibly get bad right now, at this point in the season. So when you have 2 games like Miami and Auburn those first 3 weeks, I think even the most reasonable fans thought, hey, if you split those 2 games, it's a success. So for LSU to win both of those games while not even playing particularly great football overall, things are pretty exciting right now. Ed Ogeron has definitely bought himself quite a bit of time, and one would imagine has pretty much cooled off that hot seat for at least quite a while. I think everything is, Ed Ogeron likes to preach, block out the noise and things like that, but regardless of how much he wants to avoid, the team getting too hyped now, they're number 6 in the country, there's a lot of probably relief and excitement of just proving kind of people wrong. As much of a cliche as that is, it's true. That's what they used all offseason to motivate them. The people were predicting 6-6 and 7-5, and now you just beat 2 top 10 teams. So, and like I was saying, and now all of a sudden you look at it and say, oh, and there's still a bunch we can improve on. This isn't necessarily how good LSU is. That offense is a long way to go. So if they can theoretically keep improving, who knows what this team could do.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned it right there. We think this team didn't even play necessarily all that well. They were trailing for most of that Auburn game, and there were times when I thought, watching it, I thought they could definitely be improved. They could definitely play better. They definitely handled Miami well. But you said that they want to prove everyone wrong, like almost a cliche, and for them it's working. But being that they were like number 25 and now all the way up to number 6 in just the span of a couple weeks, what did we get wrong about this team specifically? Like, what did we underestimate about the LSU Tigers?
That's a really good question. I think it's probably the first time I've had to really think about what we got wrong. Because the funny thing is, and I think this is what makes it all so interesting, is that I'm not sure we got much specifically wrong football-wise. I really don't know. We all said this was going to be a troubled offense. We thought the offensive line wouldn't be particularly great. We said this defense would be fantastic. And we said a lot of it would come down to Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow has, been inefficient, yes, but effective and smart and controlled the ball. I guess the number one thing we got wrong with this team was we said there really wasn't any running game, and we said there's no running back that would kind of follow that line of the Fournettes and Darius Geises of the world. And none of them are by any means those guys. Nobody thought any of these guys had that kind of talent, and we didn't think any of them would even be particularly effective. We just didn't think the offensive line was good enough. We didn't think any of the running back talent was good enough. And then you got a guy like Nick Brossette, who has proven me wrong, and I'll be the first to admit it, where, I probably thought of him as second in that running back competition maybe even third going into camp. And, Ed Ogeron even himself caught himself and said, he's a great running back. Well, he's a good running back. And now he runs for 100 yards and looked fantastic in those first 2 games. Then had a pretty solid day running for 69 yards against Auburn this week. That running game has almost been LSU's most consistent thing, which is the absolute opposite of what we expected from this team. So, in terms of things that have proven us wrong, that's the main one. But the other thing is just everything else has gone exactly as planned, and they're just finding – I think Spencer Hall of SB Nation wrote a pretty dead-on story Monday morning, basically saying LSU is the grapplers, fighters of the best fighters in the country, because they are going to draw you into these ugly, low-scoring games with their great defense, and they know how to win those games. They know how to win those ugly situations, which kind of fits exactly what you'd expect out of an Ed Ogeron team, And one thing I'll go back to, just to say, hey, I'm not sure we got that much wrong, but they're just winning, is that I'm a big believer in Bill Connolly's work with SB Nation of the advanced stats and the S&P Plus and all the analytics in college football, and I think he does fantastic work. And for what it's worth, LSU is number 21 in the country in his S&P Plus metrics, which are opponent adjusted. Like they factor in that they play good teams. And I mean, LSU is winning these games, and they deserve all of the credit in the world for that. But it's not necessarily sustainable. A lot of their, on offense, they are still inefficient. They're relying on big plays, which historically is not sustainable. And I mean, they have the number 6 defense in S&P Plus, which is exactly what we expected. But they are just an inefficient offense, and they might be what we expected. They might be a 21-25 team in the country, and they're just finding ways to win these games. And who gets the credit for that? That's a whole different conversation, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head right there. These games that are winning are, especially that Auburn one, watching it, I couldn't really tell who was going to pull out ahead because it was just so ugly. And yeah, they were able to pull out and win that game, but like you have to question, is that sustainable to always win your games by such close margins? Because if you look historically, if a team has, let's say, 7 one-score games, historically they're going to win and lose about 50% of those, or maybe if they're good, they'll win 75% of those. Whereas over the course of the season, starts to average out, and those 1, 2 point or 3-point wins start to become 1, 2, 3-point losses.
Absolutely, and yeah, I'll be the first to say I don't think what they're doing is sustainable. And I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that we're seeing improvement with that offense every day. So I mean, now I don't want to jump to think suddenly they'll be a top 50 offense. I'm not saying that, but you are seeing improvement there every day. So maybe in a few weeks, once the SEC schedule gets harder, maybe the offense will be clicking a little better, and Joe Burrow and offensive coordinator Steve Ensminger will be able to be a little more efficient. So it's not as if 3 weeks into the season it's the be all end all of what this team is. But yeah, what we're just saying about winning these grappling, tough, ugly games and coming from behind like they did, and the Miami game was kind of an outlier in terms of I don't think anyone who watched that game really thought LSU was 30 points better at any point. But that's not sustainable. No, that will definitely fall off. They will start losing some of those games. I think Bill Connolly, I had a piece go up this morning, where I talked to Bill Connolly about all these analytics and whatnot, and he said the formula LSU has right now, this volatility, yeah, that's going to win. It's going to win them some games that they probably wouldn't be expected to win. Auburn, for example, or maybe they could pull out one against, the Georgias or Mississippi States of the world. But it's also going to usually cost you one game you shouldn't win. You shouldn't lose. So it goes both ways. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, exactly. It's like where if you're constantly drawing in teams to play in close scoring games, eventually you're going to pull in the wrong kind of team that's lesser than you into a close one, and they get one big play, and then your season's over, kind of thing.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And hey, this was part of. I shouldn't speak too confidently, but I'm getting the sense this was all, to some small extent, part of the plan, and they knew what they were this year, and they knew what their strengths were. So I'll give them credit where credit's due, that they probably are doing a good job executing exactly what they wanted. So I don't want to take away credit from that, but yeah, like we're saying, it's hard to imagine it going further.
I have to agree with that. I think this is the big takeaway I've had from this team is with these wins. I would look at Ed Orgeron as someone who, obviously was on the hot seat, and now he's able to take this team where, like you said, they know exactly what they are, and they do that to the best of their abilities. And you gotta ask, is there anything better than what a football team can do than that? That's kind of the goal of every team, and I think LSU is finding who they are and playing it as well as they possibly can each game.
Definitely, and if I'm going to give Ed Orgeron credit for anything he's truly succeeded with this year, it's and Ross Dellinger of Sports Illustrated did a good job touching on this back after the Miami game. Is some of the best successes he had was he did a great job with the transfer market in the past 2 seasons, and that is completely showing itself this season. That is a huge part of what they're doing. The guy who made the game-winning field goal against Auburn, Cole Tracy, the same guy who made a 53-yarder against Miami. He's a guy who was kicking at Assumption College last season in Division II school. Your quarterback is Joe Burrow, who's clearly been an upgrade over what LSU's had in recent years. One of your best defensive tackles is Braden Fehoko, a transfer out of Texas Tech. You're just seeing that transfer market that he's really tried to plug some of these holes with. He deserves all the credit for that. And then the other thing him and LSU both deserve credit for, because LSU had to pony up the money, was Dave Aranda, who was getting courted to go to Texas A&M and looked like he was probably pretty close to going. They paid him $2.5 million a year. And when you're looking at and making him at the time the highest paid coordinator in college football. And when you're looking at the MVPs of this team, there's a lot of amazing players. But the most important person at LSU right now is Dave Aranda, and I say that pretty confidently. I mean, Dave Aranda is one of the just best defensive coordinators in the game. He's smart. I think he can adjust to any situation. For example, Auburn scored on 3 straight, drives in the second and third quarter and looked like they had completely had LSU figured out. He made some adjustments at halftime, got in the locker room, did some different things with his linebackers, and suddenly Auburn's, I think, had 87 yards in the last 25 minutes of that game. That's credit to a guy like Dave Aranda.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, in my area here in Philadelphia, it's a big Penn State country, and they've past couple of years they've had Moorhead as their offensive coordinator, who's now the head coach at Mississippi State. So we obviously understand how much a coordinator plays into that, because Penn State was trending completely down. They bring him in a couple of years ago. All of a sudden, the team's going to Rose Bowls and competing for national championships. When you have a program that's willing to spend the money on a coordinator, I think that's something that's really overlooked sometimes in college football, but can mean all the difference, like we're seeing for LSU.
Hey, Joe Moorhead reference. I spent the past year, before I came down to LSU, I was reporting on Mississippi State and Ole Miss colleges in Mississippi. So I'm very familiar with Joe Moorhead, man. It looks like he's got the Bulldogs as a top 10 team this year, man.
Oh yeah, he does. They're looking awesome already. So he's an awesome coach. His offensive schemes are crazy. I love it.
I'm very high on Joe Moorhead. My friends make fun of me. I'm the main fan of the Joe Moorhead fan club.
Oh yeah. My dad and I were pretty big Penn State fans, and my dad, as soon as he figured out who Joe Moorhead was, just absolutely loved him. And since he's left, Franklin's not looked too good with his offensive play calling, as referenced by that Appalachian State almost disaster.
Hey, can't jump too hard on a week 1 game. That's where you're supposed to look a little ugly and figure it out.
You can't, but it's not looking too good. I think Penn State's maybe a little overrated this season, but that's just my opinion. Going back to LSU now, with these 2 top 10 wins, they're playing in probably the hardest division in college football, the SEC West, Alabama, Mississippi State, Texas A&M, Auburn. There's so many good teams in this division, but already beating Auburn, where does LSU in your mind stand in this division?
That's a great question. It is such a tough division, and I think I had LSU 4th, I believe, maybe even 5th going into the season in the SEC West. I think Alabama's the clear number 1 in the West. I think Mississippi State, as actually we were just saying, is a top 6 team in the country, in my opinion. So I'd still take Mississippi State over LSU. What I'll give LSU is that they have proven these last 3 weeks that they're at least in that conversation for the second spot. They definitely have proven that. And by the way, I guess in all other polls, they're ahead of Mississippi State. So maybe I'm just being ignorant here. But I take Mississippi State over LSU, but they're definitely right there with them. And I think that's going to be a heck of a game when that happens in a few weeks, because you have this high-powered offense and this great pass rush going against LSU that also has a great defense. And it's going to be a fun game to watch in Baton Rouge. But I'd probably give Mississippi State the edge there, and then it comes down to Auburn. And hey, LSU beat Auburn, so I'm obviously going to put LSU ahead of Auburn. But I'm not confident that in Week 10 we'll feel as confident about that. I keep referring to this S&P Plus and these advanced stats, but hey, LSU still fell back 9 spots and went to 21 right now. Auburn moved up 4 spots and went to 14. Auburn played a better football game in most metrics of that night, and just LSU came out on top with some big plays and some penalty help. So, I still put LSU at number 3 in that division, but Auburn's right there with them, and Texas A&M is not far behind. As I'm going through this list, man, that West is brutal this year, and Ole Miss has had its moments where they look competent. Really, Arkansas is your only guaranteed, win on that slate. So, but I guess the point of this was probably to talk about what's left of this team, and I expect LSU to probably win the next 2 games with ease. Against Louisiana Tech and Ole Miss. Then you're at Florida. I think LSU's better than Florida, yes, but it's at Florida. You can't take that as a win. My gut tells me Florida wins that game, and I'll probably look like a fool, but that's a tough one. It could go either way. And then you got Georgia, Mississippi State, and Alabama 3 weeks in a row. There's a scenario where you lose all 3. There's a scenario where LSU loses 4 straight, and all of this goodwill that they've built up is gone. So, it's just that's why I'm trying not to overreact too much from where they're at right now, because that's a lot to ask anyone. And then you probably beat Arkansas, and you definitely beat Rice, and then Texas A&M is just like Florida is another complete toss-up. So as much as LSU's number 6 in the country and things are flying high right now, 7-5 or 8-4 is very realistic still. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I mean, we went into the season, the over-under was 7 wins. We always knew this was a tough schedule. We always knew that LSU, that 8 wins would be successful with this schedule. So I'm not saying if they fall back and win 8 games, that means they're less good. I think that means they had a successful year.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with you there. I mean, getting Georgia out of the SEC East that's as tough of a draw from that other side of the conference as you can possibly get, and then to stack them up going at Florida, then you're hosting Georgia, Mississippi State, and Alabama. I mean, I don't know how much more difficult you can make this schedule. And if you're talking about having 8 wins possibly, when you have matchups with 4 definite top 10 teams in Miami, Auburn, Georgia, and Alabama, and a team we're talking about that could possibly end up in the top 10 later on in the season, Mississippi State. If you can get 8 wins out of that, I think you're right. I think that's really, really good, because that means you're getting wins against some high-profile competition.
Yeah, and that's one of those things, though, that also, I know you know this, but just it makes college football so frustrating sometimes, because so much of it is about the optics. So, I mean, if LSU falls off and goes 8-4 because they go 5-4 to end the season, that's going to look really bad to a lot of people, even though in the grand scheme of things, in terms of what we thought in August and all of that, 8-4 is still a success. And I think a rational fan would know Ed Orgeron had a pretty good season if he won 8 games this year, and he wins 9. He deserves tons of credit if he pulls out 9 wins. So, I mean, but it's all optics based. It's what have you done for me lately? So if they lose 4 of those 5 games that we talked about and things get ugly, they're going to remember the more recent. It's going to seem like he fell apart, when in reality, no, this was just always expected. And I'm glad I am not an athletic director or a board of trustees member who has to make these decisions, because that's just a tough thing to sell. But you should also know, hey, they overachieved.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. It's tough, because in college football, it's where the first week can make or break your season. But if you just keep on winning and then you, like you said, lose a game or 2 at the end, then it looks so much worse than if you lost that in the beginning in terms of rankings, fan perception, and everything. So it's definitely LSU, great start, but it seems like the verdict is we just got to see they have this murderer's row of a schedule. We just got to keep on seeing this team throughout the season.
Absolutely, and just to kind of go back to that, like you said. Hey, Auburn lost this week, and things probably look dire for Gus Malzahn, right? Not in terms of job security, but things look bad for Auburn right now. But I wouldn't be shocked at all if Auburn's 9-3 and 10-2. I think you got to look at the big picture, like you said.
Exactly, especially with the SEC being as good as it is. Well, thank you so much, Brody, for coming on the podcast. Where can people check your stuff out at?
Absolutely. Follow me on Twitter at Brody A. Miller, and check out all of our coverage at NOLA.com. That'd be great.
Well, Brody, thank you so much. I'll definitely have to have you on throughout the season.
Anything for a fellow Jersey man.
Again, a big thank you to Brody for coming onto the podcast. Remember to check his stuff out online for the New Orleans Times-Picayune, as well as NOLA.com. He's a really awesome writer. Love his stuff on LSU, and they are a football team to watch out for. So if you need in-depth coverage on one of the nation's hottest teams, look to Brody Miller. All right, now I want to transition from college football to pro football, where last night the Chicago Bears beat the Seattle Seahawks 24-17 on Monday Night Football. And in that win, a standout player for the Chicago Bears, as was in the first game, was obviously Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack had a sack as well as a fumble recovery. And really just had a huge impact on the game. He was a big force for the Chicago Bears. He's already this season, he's had multiple tackles, fumbles, interceptions. That game against the Green Bay where he had that interception return for a touchdown. He's really, in these first couple games, had a tremendously big impact, and he's looking like the best defensive player in the league. I think it's a pretty safe assessment to make as of right now, that there is no other defensive player that you'd rather have than Khalil Mack. And this has brought up almost some jokes that how the Oakland Raiders got it wrong. How the Oakland Raiders should not have traded away Khalil Mack. That what were they thinking? Would they ever do something like that? Because frankly, they could use him right now. I mean, after their first 2 games, they're already 0-2, losing to both the Rams and to the Broncos being a division foe. And you're looking at these games, and especially against the Rams, giving up 33 points, against the Broncos, losing by 1 as a 20-19. You're wondering, okay, would a player like Khalil Mack that would obviously help a lot, because he's a player who makes such a big difference on the defensive side of the ball. So it's become kind of, I guess, commonplace now for people to consider that John Gruden messed up, that he should have kept Khalil Mack, that he should have given him the money he wanted, because we're seeing right now Mack's a tremendous defensive player. How do you not give him that kind of money? And I'm here to tell you that that's wrong. That even after these 2 great games, I would be very, very hesitant, and I would not give Khalil Mack the money that the Chicago Bears did. However, I understand why they did. And really, as with anything in pro football or football in general, it kind of comes back to the quarterback position. Because when the Chicago Bears got Khalil Mack, they gave him that record-setting 6-year, $141 million extension. That was the money he wanted. That was the money he was kind of holding out to for the Raiders, and the kind of contract that he really was desiring. And if I'm being honest, the kind of contract he kind of deserves because of how much he impacts the game. However, there's only certain types of teams that pay him that kind of money, and the Raiders were a smart team for not doing that, and that's because of the money they were already allocating to their quarterback. Derek Carr signed at the time he signed the richest contract in NFL history, earning $25 million a season when he signed that 5-year, $125 million contract. At the time, the richest contract, and obviously now switching up on that, there's been so many other record-breaking deals since. So when you have a quarterback taking up that much of your salary cap, it's difficult to allocate funds to different parts of your team. And the reason that the Chicago Bears could do this was frankly because of Mitchell Trubisky. Because Trubisky is already looking like a very solid quarterback, and you add in the fact that you have a good running game. I thought they have gotten some pretty solid wide receivers, especially in Allen Robinson, and then you add the fact that they've built up their defense, and now by adding Khalil Mack, taking that defense to a very pretty much elite level, with the capabilities to play that well, especially with that pass rush with Mack leading it. It made perfect sense for the Chicago Bears. But on the other token, it made perfect sense for the Oakland Raiders to trade him away. Because we always see these defensive players, and they have incredible seasons. Whether it's Darrelle Revis intercepting an inordinate amount of balls one year, J.J. Watt having high sack totals after high sack totals, Nadeem Suh at a time where he was the best defensive player in the league, Richard Sherman as a shutdown corner. And these were teams, when they had them, that they absolutely dominated for the defensive side of the ball. The problem with defensive players is a lot of times that unless for the very best players like J.J. Watt, and maybe Khalil Mack is going to prove to be one of these exceptions, that the sack totals and things like that kind of fluctuate. That, yeah, it was great that Khalil Mack got that interception for a touchdown, but next time it could be another outside linebacker. And that what I mean by that is that defensive players, yes, they can have a huge impact on a game, but they don't have as much of a consistent impact, in my mind, as we would like to believe. That at this point in the NFL, it's been proven that one of the best ways to win is simply to build up a defense with a lot of solid pieces surrounding it. That if you look at some of the great defenses that have really done a tremendous job, it has 2 things. Step number 1, have a quarterback on a rookie deal. Have your QB only a couple years in the league and have him still on that younger deal. Think of Russell Wilson when the Legion of Boom happened in Seattle. Think of Carson Wentz this past season with the Eagles. Even though it was Nick Foles, it was still the idea that their star quarterback was not taking up much of the salary cap, allowing you to then go spend the money and the draft picks to acquire a lot of good defensive talent, to spend some draft picks and pick up good defensive players. Think Roquan Smith for the Bears. And then also have the salary cap to then go out and get a star player. for the Seattle Seahawks. It was for them building around they had some tremendous drafts, but they also came in and added in some other very good defensive players through free agency. Now we're seeing for the Bears going in and adding in Khalil Mack. Where for the time being, yeah, they can afford his contract because Mitchell Trubisky's only making what a rookie QB makes. For the Oakland Raiders, Derek Carr's making that kind of money. And if you're going to ask me, would I rather give Derek Carr the kind of money he's making or Khalil Mack the kind of money Mack's making? I'm going to take Carr every single day of the week, simply for the fact that a quarterback has so much control over the course of a football game that you need a franchise quarterback in order to be successful. You can have the best defensive player in the league and still not really get anywhere. Ask the Texans with J.J. Watt. When he was dominating, he was incredible. Yet the Texans couldn't make it to an AFC championship game, much less a Super Bowl. So, in order to have a team that really goes far, you need to have that quarterback first and foremost. And the biggest window for a team to win is when they nail on a very good quarterback, and he's able to play, maybe not to his full potential quite yet, but he's able to play close enough to his full potential early on in his career to where he's not taking up a big chunk of the salary cap, and they can still add in pieces around him. That's why the Chicago Bears had the money to give Khalil Mack what he wanted. That's why they had the money to go pick up someone like Allen Robinson. But that's also why the Oakland Raiders didn't have that kind of cash. That for the Oakland Raiders, at this point, they have to pay Derek Carr top dollar. Because until proven otherwise, he's worth that money. Because you might say, if you're a Raiders fan, that they would rather that Mack's a better player than Carr at his position. Yes, Mack is a better outside linebacker than Derek Carr as a quarterback, if you look at how they rank positionally in the NFL. But you can't tell me that Khalil Mack is more valuable to a team than Derek Carr is. Because you don't want to go to a backup quarterback. You don't want to have to go to replacement value for QBs. Because when you get to that level, it gets ugly. It gets ugly really, really quick. So the market for quarterbacks is just so much different than any other position. So until Derek Carr somewhat implodes or Khalil Mack breaks the sack record for seasons on end, I'm going to maintain that the Oakland Raiders did the right thing. That now with having a QB in Derek Carr that they want to build around, they got first-round picks in 2019 and 2020. They got a third-round pick in 2020, a sixth-round pick in 2019. So, yes, they had to give up a second round and a fifth rounder in that trade as well. But you're telling me you're getting two more first-round picks and one more middle of the road and one more towards the end of the draft. But there's two first-round picks especially. Those are picks that for the Oakland Raiders right now, since they're paying Derek Carr so much, they can go get some rookie players who will have instant impacts and pay them rookie salaries, to go get a star wideout on a rookie deal, to go get another star defensive player or offensive lineman and have them on a rookie deal. To me, that's more valuable, being able to have that availability when they have a quarterback that's already eating up so much of their salary cap. That's more valuable to them because they now need to go and find those cheap values. The Chicago Bears already have their cheap value in Mitchell Trubisky on a rookie deal. They can go out and spend that cash. The Raiders, they just can't right now because they're paying to Derek Carr, so they have to go out and find those values. And with that trade, I know it's 2 games in, and I know no one really likes to overreact or anything, but I don't see how we're looking at this trade a couple years from now and saying Chicago Bears clearly came out on top. Because at the end of the day, you pay your QBs the money. You pay them as much as you need to keep them there, and then you focus on building a team surrounding them. And if you're telling me that you'd rather either have one player in Khalil Mack or possibly 2 more first-round picks who could become very, very good and not take up a lot of your salary cap, so still allowing you to go out and get some other free agents, I think for both teams it was a very smart trade, and that it's unfair to criticize John Gruden or the Oakland Raiders just yet for how this trade pans out. If they end up having 2 busts with those first-round picks and do nothing with the extra available salary cap that they freed up for themselves by trading Khalil Mack, then I'm going to question it. But until proven otherwise, they've set themselves in a position to have a very, very competitive football team for years to come, which is something that Oakland certainly could use. And with that, that'll wrap it up for this edition of the Jackson Neill Sports Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. It was a long episode. Got some more great episodes planned, so keep it right here on SoundCloud, Stitcher, iTunes, and YouTube for the Jackson Neill Sports Podcast, published throughout the week. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at JacksonNeill20. Links to all these things, and in addition to Brody Miller's content, are in the description of this podcast or video, whichever platform you're watching it on. Also in the same feed are the Jackson Neill Music and the Anything Goes with Jackson Neill podcasts. On the Jackson Neill Music podcast, I interview music writers, not as often as the sports ones, but I interview music writers and give my opinions on the latest things happening in music. And on the Anything Goes with Jackson Neill podcast, I interview musicians and tell you guys who you guys should be listening to and give you guys some really cool up-and-coming people. Right now, my next episode for Anything Goes with Jackson Neill is going to be with M. Taylor. Really, really awesome guy. He's an up-and-coming rapper. He just recently signed with Ice-T's, 6 in the morning, and that Ice-T, that legendary rapper, he signed with his record label. So I had that interview with M. Taylor coming out soon. Stay tuned to all the social media and these podcast feeds for that release. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you all next time.